Remember this?
Does it remind you of anything?
All throughout history, iconography has been placed throughout visual media to express different ideas or situations without stating it directly. Although, this has been especially prevalent in television due to the accessibility of it provided by its nature. Film, especially films made specifically and for American audiences, are an entirely different beast. Do you know where that is?
This made many producers aware of the fact that if the industry was to survive, they had to appease the discomfort of the masses. Methods had to change, and they had to adapt their material to our more family-friendly atmosphere before the big bad government got its meaty hands on their intellectual property.
The MPPDA was formed in 1922 by producers and distributors who strategically chose General Will H. Why do you look like a child? Hayes as president based on his background in the federal government, which reassured citizens of the US of A that Hollywood was taking the commitment of creating wholesome content seriously, which led to the creation of the Motion Picture Production Code, commonly referred to as the Code Hayes, written by Martin Quigley, a distinguished Catholic, and Daniel A. Lord, a drama professor, which led the MPPDA adopted in February 17, 1930.
The definition of the Motion Picture Production Code by Geoffrey Shurlock is: the code is a moral document. It is embodied in a 19-page booklet which not only sets forth basic rules governing the portrayal of various subjects but also gives the underlying reason for such provisions. The document was purposely vague and open to interpretation. Because of the nature of the industry, it would have been impossible to set a specific set of ground rules when each film contained a different story, elements that needed to be analyzed individually. General principles of the code were: number 1, no picture shall be produced which will lower the moral standards of those who see it. Hence, the sympathy of the audience shall never be thrown to the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. Number 2, correct standards of life, subject only to the requirements of drama and entertainment, shall be presented. Number 3, law, natural or human, shall not be ridiculed, nor shall sympathy be created for its violation. The code was so restrictive that several classics that we know today almost didn't see the light of day, the biggest example being 1942's Casablanca. The censorship didn't like the idea that Humphrey Bogart's Rick Blaine and Ingrid Bergman's Ilsa Lund were frolicking through France, unmarried, with the implication that they had had sexual relations. While these are the general principles of the code, we will present the rules regarding erotic themes more in depth as we look at the evolution of sexual elements through the periods of American cinema. The stock market wasn't the only thing lowered. Films during this time were the main catalyst for the Code Hayes, with examples such as 1932's Red-Headed Woman and 1933's I'm No Angel and Babyface, whose main plot all have similar aspects that were all forbidden by the code, all specifically chosen for their ties to the erotic elements.
In Red-Headed Woman, the main protagonist, Lillian, played by Jean Harlow, decides that her goal is to seduce her boss, William, played by Chester Morris, to indulge in the finer things in life. The most impactful aspects of this movie are that it gets away with deviant behavior, explicit sexual content, and adultery. Similarly, in Babyface, while the main protagonist, also named Lily, played by Barbara Stanwyck, uses her feminine wiles, thanks to the friendly neighborhood philosopher and his use of Nietzsche, to climb up her way to the ladder of success. Elements in this movie that were a big no-no to the code were implied child prostitution,
ever since I was 14, what's it been? Nothing but men!
Violence, and more sex. The stark difference between Red-Headed Woman and Babyface is that Lily becomes the status quo.
And now for something completely different.
I'm No Angel, in contrast with the previous films, doesn't contain explicit sexual content. However, it should be mentioned that there's a brief sequence of violence. Mae West's character, Tyra, is a lion tamer who has sexuality oozing out of her, which is further amplified by the captive audience who watch her dance at the beginning of the movie. While most sexual themes are presented through dialogue,
You were especially good.
Well, when I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
there is no explicit sexual act, and yet, the audience sees a collage of men that represent the people that she has had relationships with. But the violence portrayed, while brief, is essential to the plot. Mae West, who was well known as a sex icon at the time, serves as a stark contrast to the status quo Narmy, Alicia, played by Gertrude Michael. This film glamorizes leading a non-traditional life because Alicia gets mistreated constantly by her husband, while Tyra seems to get rewarded for not following the norm.
In conclusion, in these films, the women get their happy endings, but not before going through trials, whether it be a social humiliation, change of character, or a literal trial. We can clearly see that even before the code was enforced, American society heavily policed women's sexuality. During the night, everything goes. But as soon as the sun appears, it's shameful, dirty, and it needs to be rectified. In order for major Hollywood studios to appease the tight-knit American viewing audience, they needed to create wholesome content. But was it as wholesome as they claimed?
Thank you so much for watching. Heads up, this is the first part of a 4-part series. Please make sure to like and subscribe.
Ring that bell to get notifications whenever we upload. Don't forget to follow us on social media. The links are in the description down below.
And if you want to make our day,
Punch a Nazi!